U glavi nosimo sofisticirani uređaj nedokučive složenosti. I dok se tajne mozga tek otkrivaju, pitanje je hoće li ikada biti sve otkrivene. No i na taj se uređaj može utjecati na različite načine. I dok smo naučeni razmišljati o fizičkom imunološkom sustavu, u sjeni ostaje mentalni imunološki sustav. Michael Nehls, liječnik i genetičar i autor knjige Indoktrinirani mozak, objašnjava ključnu ulogu hipokampusa za mentalni imunološki sustav kroz razvoj društvene savjesti, kreativnosti, moralnog ponašanja. Opisuje i mnoge aspekte društva izbivanja koji uništavaju upravo hipokampus, ključan za autobiografsko pamćenje, koje je pak ključno za stvaranje individualnosti. Te indoktrinacije tada više nisu vanjske, već pokazalo se u direktnoj vezi sa neurobiološkim mehanizmima mozga. S mozgom nikad niste na čistu. I tko zna, možda ćemo ga uvijek sretati negdje ovdje, na rubu znanosti. Dobro večer. Michael Nehls ili Michael Nehls, ovisno hoćete li izgovarati u njemačkom izgovoru ili na engleski, liječnik je, molekularni genetičar, autor više knjiga, od kojih su neke Iscrpljeni mozak, Metuzalemske strategije, potom Revolucija algenog ulja, uglavnom materija, što bi se reklo, vezana uz mozak, a upravo uz mozak vezana i današnja tema koja je vezana uz knjigu gospodina Nehlsa koja se zove Indoktrinirani mozak. Dobar dan. Pa eto, s obzirom na naziv knjige Indoktrinirani mozak, možda da krenemo kao što sve dobre priče obično i kreću od početka. Čime se bavi ta knjiga, ali još važnije, što je vas potaklo na razmišljanje u smjeru kojim ćemo se danas baviti, odnosno u smjeru, evo odmah ćemo odati ubojicu, smjeru zapravo hipokampusa i kako na neki način društveno uvjetovanje utječe na hipokampus i sve što ide s tim. Pa kako je počela ova knjiga, kako ste uopće došli nakon vaših prethodnih knjiga i do ove?
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much, Krishu, for inviting me to this interview here.
Hvala vama.
Yeah, it's a very fundamental question you're actually asking. It's about evolution and how we actually, came to sit here, you know. So if you consider that evolution is a long process, billion years maybe, when the first organism appeared for whatever reason, you know, maybe by a meteor, maybe they just appeared somewhere in the ocean. That's one of the two theories. But at the end of the day, nature evolved, you know, evolved humans, evolved all creatures that we see now, and many others which have died out. And the question is, how does evolution count its success? And it's of course by the number of children that you produce, and that they survive and produce more children. That's the only way your heritage essentially continues, your lineage continues. And in order to be successful, nature evolved systems to protect essentially the individual and the group. And these systems we call immune systems. So one immune system is our physical immune system, protects us against toxic or infectious microorganisms that can kill us, you know. So we have a physical immune system. But humans also, and most higher species, but particularly humans, develop something which are called the mental immune system. And the mental immune system protects us against pathogenic macroorganisms, you know, most likely other humans. So we have, in this type of immune system, make sure that we collect life experience, for example, so it's very closely connected to our autobiographical memory center, which is the hippocampus you alluded to. Mm-hmm. Hippocampus is a structure in our brain. We have two of them here in the temporal lobe of the brain. And this structure has the shape of a seahorse. That's why it's called hippocampus. And it's known to be our autobiographical memory center. Sometimes I refer to it as our personal diary. Mm-hmm. So it collects everything that we talk about, that we learn, all the narratives that we learn from childhood onwards. And of course, the reason that we memorize all these things is that with this life experience, we are more likely to make good decisions, because the more we know, the better we can judge. And the more that we can judge, the more we are able to protect, for example, our children. And this autobiographical memory center and its ability for lifelong learning is actually the major reason that people, like humans, actually age up to an age that is, if you compare it, for example, to chimpanzee, in the wild, their life expectancy ends when the females get into menopause. Menopause meaning that once they stop producing more children, not only the females stop living, but also the males, because longevity is not part of their program to protect the generations following. Mm-hmm. But in humans, success, because we have only a small amount of children, is based on life experience. And it was shown at the end of the 19th century that if a grandmother is in the family, a grandmother who doesn't get her own children anymore, but is now in the family, can protect her children, but also her grandchildren, the likelihood that the grandchildren survive until adulthood is extremely higher. For every 10 years, the grandmother is part of the family. Two grandchildren reach adulthood and continue essentially the lineage of her genetics. Mm-hmm. Meaning the older you become, the more likely it is that your genes are transmitted to the next generation. So aging is part of, and learning is part of, ingrained kind of in our genetics. Mm-hmm. It's a very important fundamental concept. So, so the protection of our children, of our grandchildren, is part of our evolutionary, let's say, imperative. Mm-hmm. It's part of. We feel good doing it, mm-hmm, because nature wants us to feel good about it, because otherwise we wouldn't do it, and then our lineage, of course, would break down. So when in 2020 measures were introduced, and particularly in 2021, more extreme measures were introduced to fight a strange disease, which there were many other ways we could have been able to fight it, the protection was off. I mean, I saw parents and grandparents bringing their children to the doctor and getting them injections of a genetic material which nobody knew what the consequences are. That's something which is completely contrary to what our nature actually, the natural imperative. So something must have happened in their brain that that essentially stopped this natural imperative to protect the family in a way that would be appropriate, and they actually, harmed their children doing that. Mm-hmm. And so I wondered, what is happening? And I had experience from research on the hippocampus for 15 years. I was working on Alzheimer's disease, and for the audience, Alzheimer's starts in the hippocampus. Essentially, the first part of the brain that is being destructed in Alzheimer's is the hippocampus. That's why I call Alzheimer's also the hippocampal dementia, mm-hmm, because it starts in the hippocampus. And I published a paper based on my research in 2016. It's called The Unified Theory of Alzheimer's Disease, where I show that a particular function of the hippocampus is required for its lifelong functioning, and the ability in old age to really protect your grandchildren, to maintain your seniority, your wisdom, your life experience. So we have two choices. Either we get Alzheimer's and our abilities to think and to memorize and to essentially contact our memories in the brain and revive them is destroyed, or that we call senility, mm-hmm, or we drive into towards what nature actually intended, to seniority, giving essentially our children and grandchildren with our knowledge a greater chance to survive. Mm-hmm. And in this paper I show, and I allude to the diary function of our hippocampus, that when we are born, we don't know how many pages in this diary we have to write down. We don't know how old we are, how old we are getting. So, so nature invented for the hippocampus a unique function, and we call this unique function adult hippocampal neurogenesis. It's a difficult word, but easy to understand. Adult means it produces new cells, neurogenesis, neuron, nerve cells, genesis, the generation, the development, the birth of new nerves, of new cells in the adult, in the hippocampus. So adult hippocampal neurogenesis refers to the unique function of the hippocampus to produce new cells lifelong. And so what these cells are doing is they provide new pages where we can write down new memories, new experiences. So with every day we live, every day new pages are generated by adult hippocampal neurogenesis, which allow us to grow our individuality, which is strongly connected to creativity, our wisdom, because we have more experience, particularly reflection on experiences creates wisdom, because we put new perspectives on what we learn, and together I call this functionality in my new book the mental immune system. That's the very immune system which protects us against dangerous macroorganisms, and nowadays these macroorganisms are humans and not wild animals anymore. And part of the function of this production of new nerve cells is not only to provide new pages, that where we can write down new experiences every day. These new nerve cells have additional functions, which I show in the book. One function, for example, is they are the neuronal correlate of curiosity. So once you shut down essentially the production of these cells, and we come probably to that, how that can be done. But if you shut down the production of these new nerve cells, you actually shut down curiosity. Also, they are the neuronal correlate of what I call psychological resilience. So if you shut down the production of these nerve cells, psychological resilience goes down, and the likelihood that if something happens that you don't like, that depression develops is very high. So the shutdown of production of these new nerve cells correlates with an increase of depression in the society. So together, the ability to memorize, curiosity, heightened essentially resilience, psychological resilience, which you need actually to be curious. I mean, curious is one thing. I would like to know, but I fear to learn. So you need both. It's like two sides of one coin, curiosity and resilience. And the fourth function, which I developed over the last years, an understanding which is very important. It goes back to a publication, or actually a Nobel Prize, which was given to Daniel Kahneman in 2002. He's a psychologist. He got the Nobel Prize in economy for essentially developing the concept that we have two ways of thinking. We can think what I call the zombie mode, just unconscious going through life. Our brain makes predictions unconsciously how life evolves, and we just follow essentially known paths without thinking. This is what we call the zombie mode, or system 1. But he also showed that we have a system 2, a system that can think about what's going on, that draws new conclusions and allows us to change our behavior. He calls it system 2. And it's known that system 2 requires mental energy. So it's prone to exhaustion. And actually, when I work on a book, for example, I write the whole morning, I feel this kind of exhaustion. We call it ego depletion. And under ego depletion, I'm more likely or less likely in the evening to essentially turn on system 2 if the situation requires it. So social conflict situations, I rather don't discuss in the evening. I wait until I'm next morning when the mental energy is back and I'm more capable of seeing all the issues and problems if I answer this way or that way in a social conflict situation, for example.
Na koji način u knjizi pišete da zapravo mnoge operacije i mnoga djelovanja u zadnjih nekoliko godina su imala, ispočetka ste uočili, a kasnije ste pomislili možda to i nije slučajno, upravo utjecaj na taj mehanizam hipokampusa koji kroz određeni mehanizam, kroz uzimanje misli iz prednjeg mozga, njihov izbor vezan uz emocionalni sadržaj koji ih pokranjuje dublje, zapravo stvara to što ste nazvali autobiografsko pamćenje, odnosno individualno odnosno stvaranje individualnosti. Koje su to mjere i na koji način one upravo, kako ste vi to u knjizi iznijeli, zapravo rade na nečem što bi se moglo opisati kao brisanje hard diska, odnosno brisanje autobiografskog sjećanja i individualnosti, da bi se neki novi operativni sistem, da se izrazim informatičkim rječnikom, instalirao. Pa koji su to zapravo bili događaji i načini na koji se upravo zbivao mehanizam suprotan od onog za kojeg je hipokampus rađen, pa kroz to nam možete malo i objasniti zornije mehanizam koji se događa zapravo u mozgu i što se tu događa kada, eto, se na određeni način pristupi tom mehanizmu.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, just to summarize quickly before I answer to make sure that everybody understood. So the hippocampus has the ability, unique ability to produce new nerve cells every day. This production of new nerve cells is required that, for example, we never get Alzheimer's. So the better the production of these nerve cells, the more you are protected from Alzheimer's. On the other side, if you don't have a good production of these nerve cells, then Alzheimer's will be the likely event. Also, depression will be a likely event. Usually it comes depression, and later on you get Alzheimer's. So that's a big risk. So I studied very deeply what is required for these nerve cells to either be produced or what shuts down the production. So that's very important, because if you understand what is required for their daily production, then you are protected from Alzheimer's, and I wrote books about that. So, for example, the pharmaceutical complex tells us Alzheimer's is essentially something you cannot prevent. Alzheimer's is based on the mere fact that we age. So once you get old, you will get Alzheimer's. There's no way around it. So Alzheimer's, so aging is the cause of Alzheimer's. And I wrote a book which is called The Lie About Alzheimer's, The Alzheimer's Lie, because I show that age is just a prerequisite for getting Alzheimer's, because the process of a dying hippocampus takes decades. So that's only because it takes decades you experience the problem later on. Another fact is that depression is more likely because your mental resilience is down when the production is not up. So when you look at the year 2019, Alzheimer's, which was unknown 100 years ago, when Alois Alzheimer published the first article about his discovery, he named it a curiosity, something that he's never seen in a brain before. And he looked at thousands of brains, but he never saw something as in this patient. So it was clear Alzheimer's didn't exist 100 years ago. Essentially, it didn't exist, only a few cases. And now it's the number 3 cause of death in Europe and in the Americas. So it's completely changed. Then depression. Depression was the number 1 disease in 2019 worldwide. So clearly, the hippocampus, the production of new nerve cells in the hippocampus was at its lowest, ever in history, maybe. So, but if this is low, then what happens? If something new happens, some problem arises, how do we react? If you don't have the production of these new nerve cells, then you don't have the mental energy, because they provide the mental energy, these new nerve cells, for thinking, type 2 system 2, thinking out of the box, thinking differently. No, you just follow the rules. You just follow everything that people tell you, because you are trained to do that. You're not questioning what's going on. So when 2020 happened, and we just had a simple respiratory disease that was not even worse than influenza, and we knew actually from scientific history 20-25 years of that simply increasing vitamin D levels, you wouldn't get sick. The problem would be solved. But the narrative was, well, that doesn't work. We have a severe crisis. We need to do something to humanity. That was never done before. We have to lock down everything and so forth. But when I looked at the requirements for the hippocampus to produce new nerve cells, which was already at its lowest in 2019, the measures in 2020 aggravated the problem. So, for example, these new nerve cells grow when we do a lot of sport, when we are outside, when we are hiking, when we are physically active. Why? In prehistoric times, when you are active, you leave the cave and you go outside, and the physical activity makes you physically stronger. But every hormone that is produced to make you physically stronger has a second function. It activates the production of new nerve cells in the hippocampus. Erythropoietin, growth hormone, a long list, over a dozen of hormones produced when we are physically active, activates the hippocampus. Why? When you leave the cave, you make new experiences. These experiences are important for you, for your family, for your grandchildren. So,
Ko su još zbivanja 2020. zapravo utjecalo na hipokampus na takav negativan način, kada bi se ovako nabrojalo ukratko? Vjerujem da ih se većina sjeća, pa da samo stavimo u kontekst.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so many things happened in 2020. When I published my book, The Alzheimer's Lie, I showed what are the requirements for the hippocampus to grow, or what are the issues that keep him from growing. And it's not only physical activity, it's social activity. We have to interact with people. If I interact with somebody and when I look at somebody in his eye and I like the interaction, oxytocin is produced in hormone. And it's a bonding hormone, you know. It's a hormone that leads to bonding. And bonding requires, of course, memory. If I don't remember you tomorrow, I can't bond with you. So the problem is, when I want to bond with somebody, I need a strong autobiographical memory. So oxytocin has one main function. It activates the production of new nerve cells. So when I isolate people, I shut down the oxytocin production. So I aggravate the situation for people. I put fear narratives out there. Fear leads in a system that has a low psychological resilience to a nerve system in the brain that is starting to get overheated, let's put it this way. It produces, or it exudates substances, the brain cells, that leads to neuroinflammation. Neuroinflammation is the most potent way to shut down the production of new nerve cells in the hippocampus. So, just to give you a few examples, there are many more. The point is, everything together, every measure that was taken, in summary, individually, but even worse in summary, shut down the hippocampus. So you have to ask your question, what happens if you have a complete shutdown of production of new nerve cells in the hippocampus? Well, the first thing that happens is that, that if fear narratives, invade your brain, if you turn on the mainstream media and they tell you tomorrow the whole population will die, or some strange things like at 8 o'clock in the evening you have to stay at home because the virus becomes more dangerous at 8:05. Yeah, then you have to remember, because if you don't know, then the police might catch you in the street, and you have to pay a fine. So you start remembering things. You have to learn things without a new page being developed, created in your diary of the hippocampus. So you have no new page. So what happens? You have to override previous pages. And that is what I call the indoctrination process. Because now you erase former memories in order to memorize the fear narratives. So the fear narratives in people who have a functioning adult hippocampal neurogenesis, you have the old memories and the new memories, and you can compare them. But if the new memories override the old memories, then you have nothing to compare. And the new memories become part of your personality. In a person with a functioning hippocampal neurogenesis, you have your strong personality and you have the new information. You can contrast it, you can discuss it. You can use system 2 and compare new information with old information. But if you shut down neurogenesis, and that was done in 2020 by the measures, and we come to the measures in 2021, because as I will show, what I show in my book, the spike protein was designed to do the same thing, shut down the adult hippocampal neurogenesis. So we have a continuing process of complete shutdown, while essentially the narratives, continue to hit the brain. Fear narratives. In 2020, it was the virus. In 2021, it was maybe the war X, war Y, many different wars. And all these wars are global issues, with the threat of a third world war. We have the war, it's always the war against the climate. So we have all these wars where always we are at the brink of destroying whole humanity. So we, of course, start to remember all these things. We want to know because they are dangerous for us. But we don't have new pages to write this information on, we override previous information. And then you have a situation where in this process, which is a very strong process of indoctrination, it becomes part of your personality. And I couldn't understand when I talked to people, even in my family, who were clearly indoctrinated from the current point of view, but at the time before I started to write the book and the idea, hit me how this all is connected, I couldn't understand why reasonable people in my family I couldn't talk to anymore. Even when I told them, hey, there's a paper out here shows that if you have your vitamin D level at 50 nanogram per milliliter, that means like 125 nanomole per liter, if you have such a vitamin D level, the likelihood of dying of COVID is 0. It's a big meta-analysis, but I couldn't talk about this. They didn't want to hear. Oh, no, only the mRNA will protect us. That's the story. End of it. Go away. It's almost like I invite, even if I just start to talk about any of these concepts, it's almost like I invaded their personality as I stepped too close into their face or stepped on their toes immediately. And this reaction I couldn't understand. But if you understand it from the view of what's going on, this indoctrination process, in its whole depth, it's completely understandable. They protect essentially their own personality because the narrative has become part of their narrative.
Ako krenemo recimo od tako dosta činjenicama ojačane te postavke, da u stvari veliki dio društvenog uvjetovanja je na neki način podrazumijevao znanje o hipokampusu, znanje o tome kako hipokampus stvara individualno pamćenje, znanje o tome kako hipokampus stvara individualca koji na temelju svojih prošlih iskustava procjenjuje stvari. To je jedna velika operacija za jednu operaciju mozga na svjetskoj razini. Koja ideja stoji iza toga? Dakle, ako se jedan program briše, program individualnosti, program prošlih iskustava, program koji nas inače čuvaju u životu od praktičnih stvari i ugroza, ali također i ovako se može koristiti za druge stvari, koji to zapravo program i tko ga želi zamijeniti i instalirati? Jer naravno jedno pitanje, jedno otkriće vodi do sljedećeg pitanja. Dakle, u redu, hipokampus, pravila kako radi, što on radi. Odjednom, eto, vidjeli smo čak u vašoj knjizi spomenuto da su čak zaklada Melinda i Billa Gatesa imala čak prije 3 godine 4 rad i zapravo jedan istraživački proces što to zapravo onemogućava hipokampusu radu. Znači, čak je deklarirano da neki način se nešto mora učiniti s tim bladi hipokampus. Što se zapravo želi instalirati? Onda otkuda to stiže i koji bi zapravo bio cilj te čudne igre?
Yeah, I mean, we are talking about very powerful organizations, I mean, they infiltrated essentially every part of social life. I mean, they have completely the mainstream media under control. Of course, they also want to control the non-mainstream media, which are called the free media, and laws are essentially now organized and put into place, which are officially to protect democracy, but essentially create a situation where you have to be very careful what you are saying, I mean, we have censorship and all these things. And the question is, who is behind that? I mean, who was behind the idea that we need an mRNA injection, a genetic program put into in our bloodstream, and change, which clearly changes the brain. And maybe I should just shortly talk about that because just to understand for the listeners what the impact is, So in SARS-CoV-2 is 2. So what was SARS-CoV-1? SARS-CoV-1 was only known as SARS-CoV, because coronavirus with severe acute respiratory disease. That was trying to make a pandemic in 2002, 2003. But papers which came out later on, 3 years later, showed that it was able to cause neuroinflammation. And neuroinflammation causes a shutdown of the hippocampus. So the question is, how can I improve on that? How can I make sure that if I want to really indoctrinate people, how can I make sure I shut down for long term, maybe forever, the production of new nerve cells in the hippocampus? So I need an improved version of SARS-CoV, and that was SARS-CoV-2. And it was developed as a bioweapon in Wuhan, we know that. It's clearly shown, particularly because they left essentially a fingerprint on it. The fingerprint is actually genetic. They inserted a furin cleavage site in there. The furin cleavage site was essentially suggested by a think tank to the DARPA, the research arm of the United States, what's called the defense, what's the right name? Defense agency, and they suggested to make a coronavirus a bioweapon by inserting a furin cleavage site into the spike protein. The spike protein is causing, the brain damage in SARS-CoV. That's what we knew, but you need to make sure that a lot of the spike protein goes into the brain to have a more severe and long-term damage. So it was proposed in 2018. In 2019, a virus essentially was released, or somehow miraculously left the lab, which had exactly such a furin cleavage site in the spike protein, the one that was proposed. And interestingly, the sequence, the fingerprint, is identical to a patent Moderna essentially got approved in 2016. A sequence which cannot have happened by random mutation in nature. So it was clear it was an intended insertion from some people, and there's a paper trail who these people are. So now with the furin cleavage site in there, you only have to make sure that every cell of your body is producing spike protein. The ideal way to do that is inserting a genetic program into humans, the mRNA. And interestingly, even though the SARS-CoV-2 is termed a bioweapon, the actual bullet of the weapon is the spike protein with a furin cleavage site. So the dangerous part of the weapon is part of the mRNA that people get injected. And every person, not only adults or old people who might have severe COVID, the CDC actually, as we speak here, just put out on their webpage that babies up to the first year should get 3 shots of the mRNA against COVID in the first year of their life. 3 shots, mRNA. So what do they want? What kind of society do they want? A society which has essentially not a functioning mental immune system anymore.
Vi ste zapravo imali ste dosta dobar izvor u opisivanju kakvo društvo se želi stvoriti gušenjem autobiografskog sjećanja individualnosti i pozivali ste se naravno na 2 klasika na koje se svi pozivaju kad dođe do tema, klasika distopije, 84. od Orwella i Huxley vrli Novi svijet. Pa eto, sljedeće pitanje je bilo, s obzirom da ima tu puno detalja u koje i ne možemo sad ući u ovo ograničeno vrijeme, ako već netko mentalno resetira čovjeka, da tako kažemo, što želi staviti umjesto onog što se miče, odnosno kakav svijet bi trebao biti izgrađen, naravno na temelju promijenjenog čovjeka, odnosno da bi taj promijenjeni čovjek mogao biti funkcionalni dio tog društva, kakav se to svijet zapravo gradi, o čemu se tu radi, kuda to vodi taj, evo, iz vaše perspektive knjige, napad na hipokampusa, ali to je naravno dio šireg društvenog inženjeringa.
Yeah. The word reset is actually what resetting the hippocampus, our memory, is the key word. There's one book out by Klaus Schwab, which I read at the time. I didn't read the whole book, to be honest. It was impossible for me psychologically. But I read parts of it and I read summaries. And the book is called COVID-19 and the Great Reset. So the word reset is there again. What is he resetting? Officially, they are resetting essentially the way people interact with another. How we are governed, governed by artificial intelligence in smart cities, and how everything is essentially controlled centrally by, not officially by governments, but essentially by technocrats. And they call it the Great Reset. And in this reset, you essentially install a new operating system in society. There are 2 ways to do that. You can create laws, but the more efficient way to create a new society is if you put the new operating system directly into the brain of people. Once it's put into the brain and it becomes part of their personality, then that's the future. It's for eternal. So that's actually the change from George Orwell's 1984 to a higher level, which is Brave New World. we're actually entering a brave new world where everything is essentially already installed at birth already in this novel. At birth, you already have essentially the installation of the operating system of the brave new world society, and nothing is questioned. Nothing is questioned anymore because there is nothing to question, because you don't have memory to alternatives. So if you don't have an alternative viewpoint, then everything that you see is what you get, and that's how you accept it. And then you don't need wars anymore. In 1984, to create the society there, you have to have a permanent war. But in Brave New World, the author, Aldous Huxley, says the wars were required in the beginning, but then they were not necessary anymore. Once everybody has been transformed, once the indoctrination has been perfected, you don't need war to keep people at bay. They just, it's over. The game is over. And so I wondered how you can get from 1984, wars against everything that we experience right now, and control and censorship. We are totally in 1984 right now. But how can this society transform after the reset into a society that is equal to Brave New World, dystopia? And the way to do that is actually, because it's difficult, in Brave New World, you have the babies, and they're immediately, transformed, indoctrinated from day one. But here we have a society of people who have a past, and so this past has to be erased. So I wondered how we can put a new social operating system into the brains. And by the way, social operating system can be abbreviated, in SOS, save our souls. I actually regard the hippocampus as the door, the doorway to our souls, because that's where all our memories are stored. Everything that is important for us is in the hippocampus. But once you destroy this door, and install this social operating system, then we are doomed. And so the only way to install, of course, a new operating system, you know that from computers, you have to erase the hard drive.
Ili ga se može instalirati na one koji ga još nemaju, a to su konkretno djeca koja u stvari nemaju autobiografsko sjećanje i prethodna iskustva, jer jednostavno prekratko žive. Čini se da su oni u stvari zapravo unutar 20-30 godina onaj potencijal na koji se cilja. Taj globalni mentalni reset koji kao nikakav cilj ima taj centar u našem mozgu. Koji bi bio zapravo fundamentalna promjena čovjeka u ovom našem današnjem društvu, još uvijek staromodnom, i u tom modernom prikazanom u tom knjizi, recimo Vrli novi svijet? Što se tu zapravo esencijalno za čovjeka mijenja? Zato jer možemo čuti razne rečenice, recimo Povelja pametnog grada, koja glasi: nećete imati ništa, bit ćete sretni, i sve tako nekakva obećanja koja su naravno vezana i uz prijetnje klimatskim promjenama koje će se dogoditi ako ne instaliraš pametni grad. Pa onda pametni gradovi su nešto što ljudi smatraju jako naprednim konceptom, ne razmišljajući o tome da je pametni grad u biti veliko sredstvo optimizacije, što znači da će on izgledati potpuno drugačije od onih elemenata ljepote koji današnji gradovi imaju. To će biti funkcionalni korporatistički grad. Dakle, kako se to društvo stvara? Čini se da se to stvara nekakvo društvo, ne znam kako bi ga se opisalo, daljinski upravljanih pojedinaca.
Yeah, it's almost like a society where the people control themselves. Actually, if you look into the officially governmental sites, in Germany, there are documents there where they already project, the Global Development Goals 2030, and there are documents out there where, for example, one in the Ministry of, I think it's Education, where, and it's in the book, I have all the sites are in there with, of course, references where you can find them. Everything which is in the book is highly well documented, I believe. So here they say, actually it's looked from a viewpoint looking back, So in 2030, the politicians were asked by the people to install a surveillance system that everybody is essentially required to behave in a certain way, that artificial intelligence essentially, according to the Chinese system, by the way, it's in a German government program, that the Chinese system is a model system how people wants to be essentially controlled by the government so that everybody behaves the same and the world is be saved. So it's not only that we are controlled from the outside. Once this indoctrination process has been finished, we control ourselves. We like to live like that. We like to live in a world where everything is kind of provided freely, because we don't own anything. But of course, if you're in a society where everything is for free, then everything can be taken from you for free. Information, knowledge, food, money, everything. And this is continuing. Actually, I was just informed that the Parliament, in the European Parliament, decided that every book that you print requires that you show which tree was used, because at the end, of course, their goal is that books are not printed anymore, because we have to save nature. Of course, we can make wars.
Ili možda zato što su knjige još jedini nenadzirani oblik komunikacije. Hoću reći, ne može ti nestati struje dok čitaš knjigu, ako imaš sunce iznad sebe. Zapravo, cijeli sustav vidimo da zapravo on operira sa temeljnim uvjerenjima. Ljudima nudi zapravo neku sigurnost, fiktivnu, koja će ih spriječiti od svih nepredviđenih okolnostima, da ne moraju, recimo, raditi, da imaju neku, naravno, uvjetno dobivenu, ali sitnu svotu novca od koje će živjeti. A sve to, u stvari, u pozadini ima neka dublja uvjerenja o ljudima. I vi ste sami rekli, dok ste završavali ovu knjigu i kada ste vidjeli sve što se tu zapravo zbiva, pogotovo na neurobiološkoj razini, jer to je ono što je zapravo novo u vašoj knjizi, na koji način baš društveno uvjerenje utječu na sam mozak i na, što je najvažnije, osjećaj individualnosti. U razmišljanju kako da završite knjigu, eto, pričali ste kako vam je došlo u ruke knjiga danskog povjesničara Ruthera Bergmana, u kojem je on zapravo uočio jednu temeljnu premisu na kojoj se cijeli sustav u stvari temelji, koliko god on izgledao nekako kao da, eto, tisućama godina se gradi po nekoj inerciji, ali negdje u temelju je ideja da su ljudi zli. I to je nekako jedan zanimljiv dio, pomalo neobičan i šokantan, koji malo mijenja perspektivu. Pa, eto, sad za kraj ovog kratkog izlaganja i pokušaja zapravo opisa kako vanjski događaji utječu na neurobiološki sustav čovjeka, a time i na dakle, samu percepciju čovjeka i naravno time na prihvaćanje narativa drugih koji će doći. Što to znači, koliko duboko ide taj narativ da su ljudi, jesu li dobri ili su zli? U našem slučaju učimo da su zli, jer naravno oni su stvorili ratove, krize, sve su ljudi stvorili i naravno zato ih tu potrebno ih je malo nadzirati. Država, religija, sve služi tome da ta zloba ljudska ne uništi svijet. Međutim, taj čovjek je zapravo, proučavajući ljude, kako je rekao, znanstvenim istraživanjima, dokazuje nešto sasvim drugo. Pa rekao bih da ovo brisanje individualnosti itekako ima veze sa brisanjem ideje o tome što je čovjek. Jedan čovjek je rekao, eto, do 30. godine samo će postojati umjetna inteligencija, ljudi spojeni s njom i bit će to svijet bez osjećaja. Nama se ljudima to ne sviđa, jer im volimo osjećaje, društvo ne voli naše osjećaje jer su nepredvidljivi. Kakva je to tu sad odjednom se pojavila čudna rasprava, jer naravno više nije nebitno pitanje ko sam uopće ja i kakav sam. Jesam li dobar? Jesam li zao? Kako vam je taj konkretno povjesničar danski donio, da kažemo, trunak optimizma na kraju?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually struggling at the end of the book how to finish it, to be perfectly honest. But by happenstance, I came across a book which immediately changed everything for me. That's definitely Bergman's book, because we are all, I mean, we shouldn't be arrogant and say, well, these people have now been indoctrinated by, of course, the mRNA is the best of the world, and the government only wants the best for us, you know. They want to have the best from us, but not for us. But, of course, that we shouldn't be less arrogant about that, because we are all indoctrinated. I mean, from the first day on, we are indoctrinated by everything, by our culture. You know, culture indoctrinates us from day on, and the first day on, and becoming essentially an adult. I mean, really an adult means you have to start questioning everything that you have learned. I actually had to start questioning everything I learned in med school. Med school was a big process of indoctrination.
A to je tek početak.
It took me 10-15 years actually of research and a personal experience to learn that I was indoctrinated and I was completely on the wrong path doing research. And that's how I write books like this now, because I changed. I learned, but I had to overcome an indoctrination process. And one of the indoctrinations that are maybe as old as culture itself, as humanity maybe, is that we are taught by the leaders that people are evil. You know, and because people are evil, we need to protect them. We need to give power to the leaders that they can install police and enforcements and whatever, that we can protect essentially humans against themselves. But if I look around actually to my family, I mean, of course, I'm not always at the same, I don't believe everything that they believe, and we have sometimes some conflict, but none of them, not a single one of them is evil. And I'm pretty sure the same goes for you and for everybody. Where are the evil people if majority of people are evil? Actually, it's a minority, and this minority is a proof of the rule that people are not evil. People are just what they are. I mean, we can make decisions that are bad, but there are certainly people who are evil. They're sociopaths. And there's actually something which we call acquired sociopathy. And actually, it comes with power. The more power you have, the more likely it is that you don't feel the emotions. You don't have what we call the mirror neurons. They are not active anymore. They are kind of shut down. You don't feel empathy. That's what we call acquired sociopathy. And if you if you see what's going on, what really goes on in this brave new world, these people tell us they want to protect humanity. But at the moment, we have a 20% reduction in birth in the world. There are less people who are born. Why? Because the mRNA is essentially destroying the reproductive, abilities of people. We have more people dying. We have an exaggerated death rate. So humanity is actually shrinking. Something that should not happen if you want to protect. So what they tell us is a lie. But we, of course, are told, and we believe these people because we are also told people are evil. People are evil. People are evil because they don't wear a mask. People are evil because they don't get the injection to protect others. People are evil everywhere. People are evil on the other side of the border, so because they are not humans, they are evil creatures. We have to fight against them. But this story, this narrative of evil in humans, natural evil in humans, allows them to get all the power over us. And so when I read Bregman's book, it became totally clear to me, we have to change this narrative. We have to teach people. Everybody should read my book, but also everybody should read Bregman's book. I mean, I cited him several times. The key information, I guess, I put in there. But if one really wants to understand what's really behind his discovery, and for me, it gives me the shudder when I read it, because it completely destructed a narrative that I had also in my brain. I couldn't believe it, but I didn't have the words to shatter the narrative that people might be evil. But once I read the book, and I read it in 2 days, it was totally clear, everything changed.
Ako su ljudi dobri, onda naravno nisu potrebne mjere, može se u ljude i pouzdati da će stvari ispasti dobro. Evo za kraj ovih možda minutu ili dvije, malo praktičnog savjeta. Dakle, hipokampus je pod napadom, vezan je za autobiografsko pamćenje, osjećaj individualnosti, pa eto ukratko, onako samo taksativno, zaštita hipokampusa. Na koji način mi možemo, unutar samih sebe, jer ipak je hipokampus u našoj glavi, na koji način ga se može, da tako kažemo, zaštititi u navodnicima. Ili bez navodnika.
Yeah, first of all, everybody who's listening to us still now, while you ask this maybe last question, I give you the last answer, everybody who's watching us right now shouldn't have any fear their hippocampus is working. They wouldn't have, accepted what we are talking. They wouldn't have listened to us. So everybody who listened up to this moment now, I assume by logic, they have a functional hippocampus. So they don't need much information, except that maybe they can improve the hippocampus by following a few advices I put in my book. Micronutrients which are lacking in our, the lack doesn't mean you have no production of hippocampal cells, but you can improve it. The production rate can be improved, and I have a certain number of advices in my book. But even as important, you have to protect others. It doesn't help, like in psychotherapy, it doesn't help just to talk about the reasons of a depression and go backward and forward. You need to change the hippocampus to increase the resilience. Otherwise, the new thoughts, the new ideas that you discuss with somebody will not fall into on a ground that is fertile. You need a fertile ground for new information. And so the best way is not only for others to if you want to convince others that there's something bad going on and we have to fight against that, it's not about just talking to them, you just give them some help. And one help I created is that many people who believe the narratives got the injections, got essentially problems based on the injection. I mean, there are a lot of spikopathy diseases out there, and spikopathy causes neuroinflammation, which we call brain fog, for example. So it's a depression-like symptomatic, but it's based on the fact that you have a constant neuroinflammation in the brain based on the presence of the spike protein in the brain. And one way to get rid of the spike protein is to first get rid of the neuroinflammation and of the spike protein is by increasing the function of a certain neurotransmitter of the signals. And there's a natural inhibitor of this part of the signaling program, and that's lithium. So I was able to show that lithium is essential, and if you give people lithium, for example, the brain fog can disappear. So once you start to help people just to lift the brain fog, lithium is able to what we call microphagy. That means the ability to destroy toxic proteins. It has the ability to reduce inflammation, and it has the ability to activate neurogenesis in the hippocampus. And so it's not by circumstance that lithium is the only essential trace element that is not allowed to be in supplements in the whole world, except for the United States, by the way. But it's a trace element that is essential, and that will be also my next book, you know, discussing the essentiality. But once you start helping people, they start listening to us, and I experience that in Germany right now. Before the book was even published, I went out with information how important it is to an intake of essential amounts of lithium. And the feedback I got from people who were convinced by the narratives, oh, somebody who's you know, giving information about the narrative is suddenly helping me. So not the government who injected the mRNA into me and gave me all these diseases is helping me. They're actually ignoring me even. But here's somebody else who helps them. And if we provide people with information what helps their brain, help to get out of the problem, they have the mental and the health problem, then I think we can strengthen the fight against the problems.
Eto, u knjizi ste pod zaštitu hipokampusa spomenuli neke mentalne procese, pamćenje, racionalna suosjećajnost, kreativnost, samosvijest, psihootpornost, snaga volje. Znači, ništa ne ide bez nekog vlastitog napora. Gospodine Nehls, hvala i da do neke sljedeće prilike vidim da ih je već bilo, pa onda mogu logički, kako vi kažete, zaključiti da će ih biti još. Pa se nadam da ćemo se i opet sresti. U svakom slučaju, hvala i sretan put gdje god ste krenuli.
I certainly hope so. Thank you very much.
Evo i hvala na pažnji i vama. Evo jednog citata iz knjige za kraj, a i dobro je za podsjetiti se. Znači, evo sada kreće citat. Čovjek je najsuosjećajnija, najinteligentnija, najmaštovitija i najduhovitija životinja na svijetu. Stvorio je umjetnička djela ljepote koja oduzima dah, razvio najgenijalnije metode razotkrivanja tajni svemira. Nikad prije nije postojalo stvorenje koje se tako požrtvovno brinulo za bolesne i slabe i koje se tako neumorno borilo za slobodu i pravdu unatoč svim porazima. Pa eto, ako već nešto treba prije spavanja još ući u hipokampus, a da nisu neke loše vijesti, eto mog izbora. O tome valja razmisliti, a u tom duhu želim vam i laku noć.